30th of March 2006 began as a normal day for our family. My children left home for school and travelled to college, and my husband left for work, and I was driving here to Dublin City. Little did we know that our happy lives were about to be shattered forever. At 10:30 a.m. I received a call in my car from Gardaí. I knew something serious must have happened for the Gardaí to be ringing me. I was asked to pull over safely, which was difficult in the Dublin morning traffic, and it took me 10 minutes to manage to do that. My stomach was on the floor. I felt like I was going to pass out. Once I was parked up, my son's name and date of birth was called out to me by the Garda, and I was asked if that was my son. I said it was, and was then told that Darren had been involved in a fatal collision with a lorry near the village of Kilbeggan. My whole world fell apart in an instant. While my son Darren was driving to college in Athlone that morning, a HGV driver travelling in the opposite direction collided with his car at 8:10 a.m, completely dissecting his main arteries and killing him instantly. Darren died from shock and hemorrhage at the side of the road. It was 12 noon before I managed to return home to an absolutely devastated household, 4 hours after my son's death. We were then taken by the Gardaí to the local morgue. Our son lay on a trolley in the white body bag. He looked like he was just sleeping, with a few minor scrapes visible, but blood-tinged fluid streamed from his ears, which I wiped away with tissues. We were shocked to the core, numb, helpless, the indescribable pain of the sudden loss of a precious loved one in a totally avoidable crash. My son's body had to remain in the morgue and was not returned to us until after a post-mortem was performed. Darren, my son, was a very happy young man, the second of my 4 children. At only 18, he had his whole life ahead of him. He had just started out in college as a first-year undergraduate in engineering. He was a great sportsman who played basketball at international college level for Ireland and Gaelic football at national level for his county. He had just taken part in a school musical, Joseph and His Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat, playing one of the leading roles, totally surprising us when we attended the show. We were so proud of him. His singing One More Angel in Heaven in the musical takes on a whole new meaning for our family now. And we listen to the recording of that musical regularly, just to hear Darren's voice and to feel his presence. That's all we have left. I find it hard to describe the utter devastation. The worst feeling was the helplessness, the finality of it all. As a mother, you will do everything to protect your child, but there was nothing that I could do. The fatal collision had occurred, whatever its cause, and for us, there was no turning back the clock. There is no evidence to suggest that my son was in any way at fault or to blame for his own death. I know from my examination of the evidence gathered that the lorry driver, or HGV driver, was distracted, tired after working lengthy night shifts as a professional HGV driver, and was exceeding the speed limit for his vehicle. He was never prosecuted and escaped without so much as a fine or a penalty point on his licence. My son's death had not been treated with the priority that it deserved. Evidence not collected had been lost forever, and what made everything worse was that my son's sudden, violent death was totally preventable. At what was the worst time in our lives, when we were at our lowest ebb, we not only had to deal with the sudden and unnatural loss of our child, but we also had to deal single-handedly with the legal processes which followed. It took 6 years for all of the available evidence relating to my son's crash to be gathered and shared with our family. We had to fight for every little piece of information, and this added greatly to our personal trauma. We were to discover, during this long and painful journey, that families are kept very much isolated when it comes to the investigation, prosecution and preparation of files for the Director of Public Prosecutions and the Coroner's Inquest. Information relating to your loved one's death is not freely shared with you. In fact, there are substantial fees applied for photocopies of the evidence gathered, meaning many of our families cannot afford to avail of the information and will go into the coroner's inquest maybe to hear evidence for the first time. In contrast, the book of evidence being provided free of charge and in good time to the accused. Having had first-hand experience of this additional unnecessary trauma, I was compelled to found our NGO, the Irish Road Victims Association. We're a charitable NGO made up of volunteers only. We advocate for road safety and for road victims and provide much needed information and support to those affected by the carnage on our roads free of charge. We have no government funding and we have to rely on donations from road victims and bereaved families or fundraising events to cover our costs. Our organisation is made up of our bereaved families, or colleagues, friends and supporters of those who have lost their lives on our roads. Working alongside our colleagues in the European Federation for Road Traffic Victims and in the Global Alliance of NGOs for Road Safety and Road Victims, we work to highlight the human impact of road traffic collisions, showing the real faces behind these statistics. For us, numbers are not important, people are. Even one death on our roads is unacceptable, knowing the lifetime of pain and suffering which each one entails. Together with other stakeholders, we work hard to raise awareness of the major injustices suffered by bereaved and injured road traffic victims, and in our collective efforts to reduce road trauma. Road traffic victims have a right to know all of the circumstances surrounding the crash in which their loved one lost their life or sustained life-altering injury. All likely causative factors of these serious collisions must be investigated and the likely causes ascertained, not only to act as a deterrent and ensure that justice is seen to be served, but also so that we can prevent their recurrence and the resulting needless loss of life and serious injury. Road deaths should be treated as homicides and investigated accordingly, unless and until the evidence gathered proves otherwise. They must no longer be regarded as minor traffic offences, or even worse, accidents, where there is no prosecution or penalty at all for our loved one's death or life-altering injury. For far too long, these fatalities have been treated as accidents, even when caused by gross negligence and breach of traffic laws. In the majority of cases, they result in minor road traffic charges, where the fact that a death or injury has occurred is disregarded in law, and so the usual sentence is just a small fine or penalty points. The fact that a death or serious injury has occurred is often not even mentioned in the charges laid in the court, as if the death of our loved one is insignificant. They are rarely publicised, unlike the publicity given, for example, to air crashes, because road deaths tend to be individual tragedies. This, despite the annual loss of life on our roads being much greater than that of collective air traffic accidents, which appear to be much more newsworthy. We cannot allow this injustice to continue, and we must work together to develop a unified global strategy to tackle this major public health and human rights issue now. It's the #1 cause of death of our young people aged 10 to 29 in the world. In 1998, 16 years ago, Road Peace printed a manifesto, a copy of which I've reprinted and you'll find on each of your chairs. It was called Road Peace Campaign for Justice for Road Traffic Victims. It was a 5-year education and awareness-raising campaign to to eliminate the major injustices suffered by bereaved and injured road traffic victims. This campaign is still ongoing, and the issues raised are still as real today for our bereaved families. Brigitte Chaudry describes the dismissive treatment of the relatives of road crash victims and why Road Peace was set up. A road death is not like a normal death. It is a violent death, as violent as murder, and like murder, totally unexpected. The bereaved need help, care and support at such a terrible time, especially as they face unfamiliar procedures, inquests, investigations and hearings, where knowledge of what is going on and what their rights are can prevent further suffering. Although well-structured support is almost automatically available to victims in other situations, the victims of road death seem to be totally ignored. They are left without any assistance, sympathy even, without proper information of how their loved ones died, and apparently without any rights. The often totally innocent death of a loved one appears to be of little or no importance. This diminishes them, their life appearing to be devalued because a motor vehicle was the weapon. In perhaps the majority of cases, someone has caused their death by breaking the law, yet relatives are expected to accept the occurrence as an accident and not to expect a proper investigation, information about the proceedings, or a serious prosecution of the driver responsible for the death. If they protest, they are dismissed as vindictive and accused of being vengeful. Not only are they faced with the horrendous fact of a loved one's, often their child's, violent death, but with an attitude to these deaths which borders on the obscene and which cannot possibly be acceptable in a civilized society. This leaves the bereaved shocked and bewildered, and it also causes deep emotional wounds. And Brigitte is founder of Road Peace UK, and she was president of the European Federation for Road Traffic Victims for many years. And 11 years after this Road Peace initiative, in May 2009, more than 100 representatives of 70 NGOs from 40 countries came together for the first time in Brussels at a meeting hosted by the World Health Organization. Using their unique expertise and perspective, participants compiled 33 recommendations to their governments for the Decade of Action for Road Safety. Their recommendations are detailed in the NGO's Brussels Declaration, a copy of which I have reprinted for all of you. I had intended to read all of those recommendations, but we will discuss them at our round table sessions. In A Ballad on the Car, a book called Autogeddon by the English poet and playwright Heathcote Williams, on page 29 it is written: the visitor follows up the court reports, hit someone over the head with a discarded chrome fender and kill them. Life. Take the precaution of attaching the fender to a car and kill them. 6 months. License to drive briefly suspended. On page 31, I quote from the same book: I'm going to democratize the automobile, said Ford, and when I'm through, everyone will be able to afford one. And about everyone will have one. Now we've reached halfway house. Half the world's earnings are auto-related, half the world's resources are auto-devoted, and half the world will be involved in an auto accident at some time during their lives. On page 32 and 33 of the same book, he describes the new theatre of war. But, like some benighted South American stadium, it conceals an unpublicized death zone. 17 million dead and counting. More than twice the number in the death camps. 18 times the count in Korea. 17 Vietnams. 130 times the kill at Hiroshima. 8,500 Ulsters. The 100 Years' War in a week. The Crusades in under 30 seconds. A humdrum Holocaust. The Third World War nobody bothered to declare. And when this book, Autogeddon, was written in 1991, road deaths had reached 17 million. Now, 23 years later, it is 40 million plus. And so our comparisons with other world atrocities can be redone and multiplied again to reflect the level of this totally avoidable human tragedy. Our NGOs have to highlight in detail the problems, injustice and cruelty encountered by many bereaved and injured road traffic victims. Our aim is to end society's indifference to the destruction and pain of our families. The solutions are well known. They are unbelievably cost effective. We must go forward from here, pledging to do all that we can to ensure that this devastating loss of human life and suffering is treated with the priority it deserves. The same priority afforded to other sudden and unnatural deaths. It is the very least that our lost loved ones, those who have paid the ultimate price with their lives, deserve. The time to act is now. As our former President Mary Robinson said at the One Young World 2014 opening ceremony, you, all of you, must become ambassadors of conscience to put us on track to a safe world. We cannot condone this level of human suffering, particularly when it is in all of our power to play our small part and to do something to prevent it. Discussion on road safety, the road death threat and road injuries is not merely theoretical. It is a constantly growing issue which cannot be resolved just with resolutions, abstracts, declarations, wishes, or prayers. The problem can only be resolved with coordinated, decisive, and correctly orientated action. Outrageously, road crashes are not included in the EU's seven pillars of public health, 2013 to 2017. In total contrast to this absence, which is the cause of decimation of the youngsters in Europe, the ageing well of European citizens is included. Further, in the previous term of the European Parliament, there were not sufficient numbers of MEPs to establish a road safety committee. Let's hope things will change in the new one. As Kofi Annan said at the One Young World Summit on Thursday, when leaders fail to lead, we the people, me and you, can make them follow. Worldwide, road crashes were the 10th cause of death in 2000, rising up to 8th place in 2010, and will be in the 5th rank by the end of 2020, without taking decisive preventative steps. Nowadays, there are 1.3 million deaths due to road crashes, but the number will be 2.4 million in 2020 if nothing changes. 85% of this increase will occur in low and medium income countries. As for our young adults, road crashes have been, for some time, now the leading cause of death, according to data provided by the World Health Organization, a fact that should strongly worry us. Sweden is the country that has undoubtedly succeeded in reducing road crashes. Its famous Vision Zero policy proved that road crashes not only can be reduced, but also that there's no limit in this decline, and that targeting and reaching 0 point is absolutely realistic. This year's best road safety news is the fact that New York City, a city with 11 million citizens, adopted the Vision Zero approach. In a very short period of time, a large number of initiatives have been implemented and are proving to be very successful. The fundamental message of Vision Zero is that death and injury on city streets is not acceptable, and that we will no longer regard serious crashes as inevitable. A key part of the New York Mayor's plan to reduce dangerous driving and stop road deaths is the reduction of speed. Recent legislation to reduce the 30 miles an hour default speed limit in New York City to 25 miles per hour has been approved and will begin to be enforced. The Mayor of New York has said, these tragedies happen in every community in our city, to families from every walk of life, from the Upper West Side to Woodside, from Park Slope to Edenwald. They happen to people who drive and to those who bike, but overwhelmingly, the deadly toll is highest for pedestrians, especially our children and seniors. We won't accept this any longer. I make that pledge as a parent and as your mayor. Let's all take that pledge today and work to change things in our countries. Sir Bob Geldof finished his speech at the opening ceremony of One Young World 2014 by saying, our generation's time is over and it's your turn now. If you don't act, we have a problem. Sir Bob also said, we have to feel the shame over the next 3 or 4 days. We have to talk it through. This is our last day at the One Young World Summit in Dublin. Let's do it. Let's put an end to this shame, road crime, and in so doing help to save the lives of our young people. We can never condone or appear to accept by our inaction the needless loss of 1.3 million people on the world's roads every year.